The following program is seen statewide on California Public Television.
I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love you in the winter, summer, spring, and in the fall.
I love San Diego. It's such a beautiful city. Great weather, nice people, and a city full of history. History that goes way back. In fact, one of the most historic spots in all of California is in San Diego. It's located on a peninsula that juts right out into the sea. And it was here we spent the day, in one of California's golden parks. Well, here we are. We are standing right on the tip, well, almost right on the tip of Point Loma. We're standing with Terry DiMatteo, who is the superintendent of Cabrillo National Monument. That's where we are right now.
That's where you are, Hugh.
And this is an absolutely spectacular, I know you're probably used to this, but for those of us coming here for the first time, this is about as beautiful a view of San Diego as you're going to get anywhere.
Well, that's true. It is probably the best place to see the city of San Diego and the entrance to San Diego Bay, which is right below us.
Now, there's always something going on. There are planes flying overhead. There's ships coming in and out of the harbor. This is a very significant place in the history of San Diego and a very busy place today.
Well, it's important in the history of San Diego, but also in the history of the United States. This is where Juan Rodríguez Cabrillo first landed in 1542.
Wait a minute, 1542?
460 years ago.
Now, was he the first European to land on the west coast of what is now the United States?
That's it exactly.
And do we know where he landed exactly?
Exactly, no, we don't know where exactly, but we think that it was right down below us on Ballast Point.
So this point right out here, why do you think it was Ballast Point where he landed?
Well, as you enter the harbor, this is the only entrance in and out. This would have been the very first place where he would have had low-lying ground on which to land, relatively safe from the wind, and he could have sailed right around behind it perhaps. Where you see the ships today, it's a quiet little cove, and then he could have rowed easily ashore.
So, wait a minute, this is the only way in and out of the whole harbor of San Diego?
That's correct, the only way.
So every ship that comes in and out of the harbor comes through this little narrow opening between Ballast Point and the land over there. That's it?
That's it. We see everything from the largest aircraft carriers down to the smallest pleasure craft. You just sit here for 10 minutes and you'll see most anything go by.
And there's a lot of Navy jet activity. That's what we hear now, because this is, what is the name of this base over here?
Right behind us is Naval Air Station North Island.
North Island, right over there. And then right below us is
Naval
a
Base Point
Navy
Loma.
submarine base.
Right, Naval Base Point Loma, where there are a lot of the Los Angeles class attack submarines home ported.
Wow, so you are literally right in the middle of what's going on today.
Well, we are. San Diego is probably one of the largest naval bases in the world,
yeah,
right here beneath our feet.
All right, now we're not here, though, to talk about the United States Navy, as great an organization as that is. We're here to talk about what people see when they come to Cabrillo National Monument. And you have a lot of people coming here every year.
We get about 1.2 million people a year come to the park.
Which is amazing, because you're stuck out here on the end of this peninsula.
Well, we're stuck out here, but as we mentioned earlier, this is probably one of the 4 best harbor views in the world. And so that's what attracts people here initially, is the opportunity to see the city of San Diego, Mexico to the south, and the vast Pacific Ocean to the west.
Ah, so you get them up here with
Yes.
your scenic, with the promise of a great scenic view.
Right.
Then once they get up here, you give them a good dose of California and American history.
Well, that's true. Then they can discover all the other wonderful things about the park.
That's what we're here to do today. First off, we're doing what everybody else does, and that is look at this beautiful view.
Yes.
And now we're going to get our history lesson. Now this is interesting. You got a whole little, these legends fixed up to help people out when they're standing up here.
Well, we've got wayside exhibits that show all the commercial and pleasure craft that come in and out of San Diego Bay.
Okay, so that's for people to stand here and look at the private yachts and sailboats that'll be going through here.
Right, and the kinds of things, the kelp harvesters that come around, the commercial freighters that come in and out of the harbor.
Then we move on to the aircraft, because we got all these planes from North Island over here, so you've got all the military planes.
We try to keep it up to date. That shows all the current aircraft that you'll see on a visit to Cabrillo National Monument.
And the ships of the Pacific Fleet. So you've got all the Navy ships, including nuclear aircraft carriers that fit right through that little opening over there.
Well, as remarkable as it seems, they do.
So there's always something. Now let's see how good you are at it. What kind of ship is this out here coming through right now?
It's possible that it's a research vessel of some kind. Scripps Institution of Oceanography has a dock just up the harbor a little bit, and that's where a lot of their vessels tie up.
So there's always something.
There's always something for somebody to see.
Okay, here's our history lesson. We've come inside the exhibit room, and a fine exhibit room it is. You've got, is this Cabrillo right here?
This is Cabrillo as a corporal of crossbowmen with Cortez during the conquest of the Aztecs in about 1520.
Now, do we know for sure what Cabrillo looked like?
No, we don't know what he looked like. We've never found a portrait of the man, so we had to speculate. We thought he'd probably have a beard as a young man, as many of the soldiers did at the time. Height, he's about 5'7", about as tall as I am. And we speculate a little bit on the armament they would have carried, but this is typical of what the soldiers had at the time.
So we really don't know a lot. Wait a minute, is this Cabrillo too?
Well, it is. After the conquest of the Aztecs in Mexico, he moved with Pedro de Alvarado down into Guatemala. And then after they subdued the natives there, he became a wealthy landowner, miner, merchant, and shipbuilder.
And let his beard grow out a little bit, too.
Well, it sure looks like it, doesn't it?
Now, what have you got in the, now this must be, is this like a, like a scale model of the ship that he would have come to San Diego in?
It is, and it's speculative again because we've never found a copy of the plans. But it was a galleon of about 100 feet long, had about 100 men, slaves, merchants, soldiers, sailors, a priest or two on board. And it's typical of the kind of ship that would have been used in voyages of exploration of the time.
Was he Portuguese or Spanish?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's a debate that's been going on for years and years.
Boy, there's a lot up for grabs about old Cabrillo, isn't there?
He's pretty much a man of mystery. A Spanish historian, Antonio de Herrera, identified him as Portuguese, but modern-day historians think he may well have been Spanish. So we leave it up to our visitors to make that determination.
Was he sailing for Spain, or was he sailing for Portugal?
He was indeed sailing for the King of Spain.
Ah.
This part of the world had been divided and given to Spain. The eastern part, under the Treaty of Tordesillas, had been given to the Portuguese.
Now this shows his route. He started down in...
He started in Barra de Navidad in what is now Mexico on 27th of June in 1542 and sailed all the way up to just north of San Francisco to about Point Reyes before being driven back to seek shelter in the Channel Islands in November of 1542.
And he died in the Channel Islands.
He died there on January the 3rd in 1543.
So was he landing all up and down the coast here on this voyage? San Diego was just one of the places he landed.
That's correct. He stopped at different places in what's now Baja California. In fact, on the 17th of September, stopped in Ensenada, and then came on up here and stopped here on September 28th, 1542.
How do we know all of this information? Did he write it down?
Well, as the captain of the expedition, he would have kept a log. At the end of the voyage, we're not sure exactly what happened to the log. It's never been found, but there was a man who came to record it all, and through the recollections of the sailors and probably some extractions from the log, we know where he stopped, the places that he discovered for Europeans, the names that he gave them, the people that he met. The Kumeyaay, for instance, in San Diego had been here for tens of thousands of years.
The Native Americans.
The Native Americans.
Did they have a peaceful interaction?
Well, it's interesting. They fled when he first arrived, probably out of fear, because they had heard of other men like Cabrillo east, inland. That night when his men went ashore, they were actually attacked by the Native Americans, and several men were wounded. But Cabrillo did not retaliate. He went further into the bay, They captured some boys, gave them shirts, and the next day some adults came back and through signs explained why they had run away. Cabrillo was able to interact with them over the next several days, gather fresh water, firewood, so that he could continue his voyage on the 3rd of October.
I'm looking over your shoulder here. This is kind of a depiction of it right here. This would have been his ship. This would have been Ballast Point, where he actually landed, and we were looking out from where? Right up in here somewhere. So this is kind of the way it would have been on September. I'm having to look at the little date over there. That's a date you know right off the bat, isn't it?
September 28th, 1542.
September 28th, 1542, and Cabrillo had the distinction of being the first
European to sail along and chart the west coast of what's now the United States.
From Cabrillo,
yes,
we come to another chapter in this history here on the end of Point Loma, and this is a very interesting piece of history, isn't it?
This is one of the first 8 lighthouses built by the federal government along the west coast of the United States.
One of the first eight lighthouses on the entire western United States.
That's true. After California became a state, they needed to have lighthouses to guide mariners and safely up and down the coast. And so they built these 8. Cabrillo, or Point Loma, was probably the last of the 8, but one of the first of the 8.
Did it have a name?
It's called the Point Loma Lighthouse.
Point Loma Lighthouse,
right.
And it was built in?
1854, and first lighted on November 15th, 1855.
Now, is that the original lens I see in there?
No, I wish it was. It's one that is similar to the type that was up there, which was called a fixed white light. It sent out a sheet of light that could be seen 28 miles to sea.
Wow.
One ship captain claimed to have seen it 39 miles out to sea.
Wow, and here's where they would have, when you talk about seeing out to sea, there's a lot to see out of, isn't there?
Well, we're looking east and south. Mexico is just down in that direction, and the city of San Diego and San Diego Bay off in front of us.
And looking right over here, all these towers, there's another newer lighthouse here now.
Well, there is down on what we call Pelican Point, right on the very southern edge of Point Loma. And they found they needed to replace this one because the low clouds came in so often and obscured the light that the mariners couldn't see it. So they closed this one on March the 23rd, 1891, and opened the new Point Loma Lighthouse right down on the water's edge.
Now, how good of views do you have from up here? Is this considered a good day, an average day?
Well, this is about average for the summertime. In the winter, it's much, much nicer. After a storm comes in off the Pacific, it cleans the air, and you can literally see for 60 to 100 miles from here.
Really? So we would be able to see way down into Mexico?
You could see far down into Mexico. You can see north to the San Bernardino Mountains and east to our own Cuyamaca and Laguna Mountains.
Wow. Well, let's end up this chapter by taking another look at this lighthouse, and a pretty one it is, the Point Loma Lighthouse, which operated from
1855 to 1891.
And a beautiful little lighthouse it is, sitting out here exactly where it's been sitting for well over 150 years. Now we're really heading out onto the point.
We're almost at the very southern end of Point Loma.
And what are we going to see down here?
Well, this is the spot where a lot of our visitors in the wintertime, from about Christmas through February, come to watch the migration of the Pacific gray whales.
Ah, so the whales would be coming all up and down the coast here.
Well, that's true. Just beyond the kelp beds, which is sort of the brown slick area just offshore, we will see migrating pods of whales going to Baja California, where the females will bear their young and nurse them and get them strong enough for the return trip in the spring.
And here's a whale right out here. What a wonderful piece of sculpture out here.
Oh, it's a great little model of a gray whale and her calf.
Wow, this is absolutely beautiful. And the locals and tourists alike come out here and what, just stand here in the observation room and just look out. Boy, what a beautiful view this is today.
Well, it's pretty nice. You can stand up here for hours and just see the ships go by, look down on the tide pools, see the new Point Loma Lighthouse, and of course in the winter, look for California gray whales.
There are chapters of history here.
Right, there are 3. There's the Cabrillo story, the old Point Loma Lighthouse, and the coastal defense from World War I through World War II.
the coastal defense, because I would imagine from the very earliest days, people recognized that this spot, this piece of land here near San Diego, was critical to the defenses of this area.
They did. The Spanish were the first in about 1790, and they built Fort Guijarros down on Ballast Point, where Cabrillo landed.
That early, people knew what was going on.
Yes, that was the way to protect San Diego at the time, right there at the mouth of the harbor. But as ships developed and technology developed, they needed to be able to reach further out to sea with the guns that were developed.
And that's when we come into the most interesting remaining part of the history, the military history here.
Right. In World War I, they had certain types of guns, and then in World War II, they needed larger guns that could reach further out to sea. This structure here is what's called a battery commander station for Battery Humphrey, which had 6-inch guns that sat on the very end of the point. From here, they would take readings, they would track the course of ships, relay that information to the plotting tables. They could then develop what they call the firing solution, aim the guns, and hopefully score a hit if necessary.
So there were guns up, coming out from where that metal is right there?
No, no guns here. This is where the soldiers stood with their azimuths or their depression rangefinders to track the ships off the coast, relayed that information to the plotting tables, and then the guns were there on the end. Battery Ashburn just before you get to the park, and at other locations on Point Loma.
How many big guns were there on this point?
Well, there were 2 of the 16-inch guns that could shoot a shell 30 miles away. Then there were 8-inch guns, 6-inch guns, smaller guns down along the bayside.
Is this, I'm just looking over your shoulder, is this another one down here?
Well, that's another what they call base end station.
Right, where the guys would plot
and
call back on the radio to tell the guns where to shoot.
That's correct.
Now, they never fired from here in anger, did they, during World War II?
Never had to, fortunately. But, you know, right after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the men that were stationed here in the 19th Coast Artillery manned guns right along the water's edge. They manned whatever batteries were available, and they stood the watch, waiting for attack that many people thought was going to come.
Camouflaged against observation by hostile air or naval forces, this 16-inch gun is mounted on a barbed carriage in a casemate emplacement. It is equipped with a power rammer used to ram both the projectile and the powder. It is capable of firing about 28 miles.
What happened to all these guns and these old sites? How long did they last after the war?
Well, they hardly lasted through the war, but at the end of the war, most of them were scrapped because we had developed aircraft carrier technology with fighter planes and long-range bombers, radar and all the things that went with it. And so fixed-in-place gun emplacements were no longer effective.
Obsolete.
They were obsolete.
Well, they became obsolete, but isn't it wonderful that there's still the remnants of what was here are still here for people when they visit Cabrillo National Monument to see this chapter in its history.
And we've got a little exhibit that ties all that story together, too.
Oh, this is the kind of stuff I love. I want to go down in there. Is this the door they would have gone into the observation place from?
This is the hatch, and then you climb down a ladder. There's one level, and then you go down another hatch and into the second level.
Can we go down in there?
Sure we could.
Is it really open for people to go down?
Well, it's not open to the public, but we can open it up if you'd like to go in.
Do you have the key?
I've got the key.
Oh, great! I knew if we hung out with the superintendent, we'd get a plus here. Let's unlock it and get in there. This is going to be great. Okay, we are inside the, I want to call this a pillbox. It's not a pillbox, it is a
base end station.
Okay, what is this we're looking at? This looks neat.
Well, this is where the soldiers sat to track the targets, the ships offshore. They would have an azimuth ring and a telescope.
Right here.
Right here in the center.
Looking out through what is now kind of boarded up, but this would have given them a clear view of the ocean.
That's correct, of the ships off sea. And then every 15 seconds they would mark the degrees, they'd mark the direction, send that information to the plotting room, and that's where they would develop the firing solution for the guns.
Now, I'm looking, there are more stairs over here. Is there another level down beneath this?
There is indeed another level. This was the base end station for batteries Woodward and Grant. Woodward was a little further north up Point Loma, and Grant was south down near Imperial Beach.
Boy, we got some historic spider webs up here. This is really a capsule of time right here. It's amazing that anything remains.
Well, you know, World War II is only, what, 60 years away?
Yeah.
And if you look closely on the wall, you can see where they still recorded some of the information they needed to tell where they were.
Wow, historic graffiti. Well, now we have hooked up with Ranger Bonnie Becker because there's a lot of human history in this park. But Bonnie, there's a lot of natural history here too, and we're standing in front of a prime example of it.
Exactly. If it wasn't such a high tide today, you would see hundreds of species that live under the water right here. And during a low tide day, when the water goes out, lots of water gets trapped in little pools. And all sorts of critters live in those pools.
So these are the tide pools we've been hearing about.
Tide pools, exactly.
Now, aren't these some of the most protected and some of the most important tide pools anywhere on the West Coast?
Absolutely, on the mainland. These tide pools are extremely well protected and have been for about 20 years. And you can tell, some of our critters are much bigger than they would be in places where people are allowed to collect. We have very strict policies about poaching or collecting or bringing down buckets or bringing down large groups. We have one part of the area that is closed entirely to visitors. Our goal here at Cabrillo is to provide as much access as we can. We receive over 100,000 visitors a year that come and enjoy this area. But we also try and protect it so they've got something to see when they come.
So looking right down here, now this is a beautiful area right here. Would people actually be able to walk out on this and look and see what's there, especially when the tide goes out and goes much further out?
People can walk on the bluffs up here, but actually when the tide goes out, it goes out much further. And so it's a nice place to picnic, let's say, but there's less animal life than there is just below it. Carpeting the ground is all sorts of algal turfs, so plant turfs. It's like a carpet. And living on it, it is all sorts of critters living in it. If you were to look with a microscope, there's all sorts of critters.
We've come at the wrong time. This sounds like an absolutely wonderful place to visit.
It sure is. It's a really nice place to visit. It's nice during high tide just for the solitude and the beauty of it. And people are welcome to come here during open hours. But if you come in the wintertime, during the daytime low tides, there's tons of life to come and see.
So people who know their tide pools, people who know and appreciate this kind of natural wonder, these are known very well.
These are known very well because they're so well protected. Because we're part of a national park and have been for quite some time, these tide pools have been protected for quite a long time. And like I said, there are some critters that are just huge here. That's, I think, what we're most known for from people who really know their tide pools. Our owl limpets are 10 centimeters. I don't know what that is.
She's getting excited about this. So if you want to see a huge
owl limpet,
come in the wintertime during low tide.
Exactly.
Well, we're ending up at a point out here that has a lot of significance for a lot of different groups of people.
That's true. We have the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Mexican, and the Native American communities all help us commemorate Cabrillo's arrival in the New World and his arrival here in San Diego each year at the Cabrillo Festival.
So you have a big festival here every, what, September?
Every September, early October.
And you probably have a lot of tourists coming here from Spain and Portugal who, of course, learn a lot about Cabrillo in their history books.
Well, that's true. They do, and we tell them the story of Cabrillo and his arrival, but we also share that story with people who come from 100 different countries all around the world every year.
Wow, this is a beautiful, beautiful point here. And of course, looking right up here, you see the wonderful old lighthouse perched out there. So all of this history kind of comes together right here on this very special place here at the entranceway to the San Diego Harbor. This is probably one of the most historic places in the entire state of California, if not the nation.
It's where the opening chapter of Western civilization began for California and the western coast of the United States.
Boy, we have really enjoyed this. Lots of chapters here.
There are.
The Cabrillo chapter, the Lighthouse chapter, the military history chapter, the natural history chapter, all of these coming together in this wonderful place called Cabrillo National Monument, which is definitely one of California's golden parks.
I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love you in the winter, summer, spring, and in the fall. I love your fertile valleys, your dear mountains I adore. I love your grand old oceans, and I love a rugged shore.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our visit to Cabrillo National Monument in San Diego. It is a beautiful and a very historic place. And if you'd like to see it again or share it with your family and friends, it's available on video cassette. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.